Hello, welcome to those who are joining. Hello, Cameron. Hello, Yankee. Hello, Metika. As usual, we'll give it a couple minutes, waiting for people to join. I have an interesting idea for an activity that we might try. I don't know how it's going to go. Probably won't go very well, but it might be worth trying. We'll see. Could be a first. All right, we'll give it another minute or so and then we'll get started. Hello, Anna. Hello, Julie. All right, let's get started then. We'll get started with some chanting. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Na samane na brahmane na kapandika eva nibbake laddana samvibhajeti anang panang chabojanang tangveya vutti kasamoti ahunang purisa damang ekachanang nadadati ekachanang pavechati tangve pade savasiti ahumeda vinojana subikavacho puriso Sabbabutta amodamano pakireti deta tibasati yatta pimego tanya vitva gajjayitva pavasati talang ninnang chapureti abhisandanto varina Evang eva idikacho puggalo hottita diso dammena samharitvana uttadana digatang danang tapeti anapannena sammasatteva nibbake yattapi kumbo sampunno yassa kassachi adhokato Vamate udakang nisesang na tata parirakati tateva yachake disva hinang ukatta majjime dadahi danang nisesang kumbo viadokato danang cha peya vajjanang cha attachariya chaya ida Sammatata chadamesu tatta tatta yatarahang eteko sangaloke rattasanniva yavyako annado balado hoti vattado hoti vannado yanado sukado hoti dipado hoti chakkudo socha sabbadado hoti yodadati upassayam Amatang dado chasohoti yo dhammang anusasati. All right, English. Giving. Not with recluses or Brahmins, neither with the poor and the needy, does the base man share his food or give drink with sustenance. People say that the selfish man is like a drought, a rainless sky. One who shares his wealth with some, with some, but does not gladly give to others, is only like a local shower. In such a way, the wise describe him. But one who rains down bountiful gifts, gladly giving here and there, out of compassion for all beings, and who always says, "Give, give." This type of person is like a giant cloud filled with rain, thundering and pouring down refreshing water everywhere, drenching the highlands and the lowlands too, generous without distinctions. With his wealth collected justly, won through his own efforts, he shares both food and drink with beings who are in need. Just as a pot filled with water, if overturned by anyone, pours out all its water and does not hold any back. Even so, when you see those in need, whether low, middle, or high, then give like the overturned pot, holding nothing back. Generosity, kind words, doing a good turn for others, and treating all people alike. These bonds of sympathy are to the world what the linchpin is to the chariot wheel. Giving food, one gives strength. Giving clothes, one gives beauty. Giving transport, one gives delight. Giving lamps, one gives light. Giving shelter, one gives all. But one who instructs in the Dhamma, the excellent teaching of the Buddha, such a person gives ambrosia. All right, friends. Oh, welcome, friends. It is Monday night, so that means it is time for another festival of Dhamma with the Maggasekha community, Dhammapalooza. During this festival of Dhamma, we will do a variety of different Dhamma-related activities. We just did some chanting. We'll do some meditation later, In between, who knows what we'll do, because Dhammapalooza is, as always, guided by the community. So, in the chat over the next couple minutes, if you have any questions you'd like me to answer, any Dhamma topics you'd like me to give a talk about, if you have anything you'd like the community to discuss related to Buddhism, you can put that in the chat. If not, as always, I have a backup sutta, or at least, yes, last week we did sutta roulette, which was quite fun. This week I have an idea. I'm going to leave it open for questions and answers, but there's something in the back of my mind that I don't know if it'll actually work or not, but it's worth a shot. So if nobody has questions and there's nothing else, we might, not quite a game, but something educational anyway. So hello, Julie. Hello, Malika. Hope all is well down in Brisbane. Always good to see my Australian friends. Hello, John and Audrey. Welcome. John covers all the bases. Good morning, afternoon, evening, and night, y'all. This is why those of you who are on the Discord, you might wonder why Bante J is the only one who says this one silly thing every day. You have no idea what it means. But I always type in Gadave. Right? Gadave. In the early days of the Discord, almost 8 years ago, this was especially true. In those early days, we had a pretty big Australian contingent, including Aya. Why am I blanking on Aya's name? I'm blanking on Aya's name. And Venerable Pasana, Santachari, I think are Aya's, the Australian bhikkhuni, Santachari, and the woman who would become Venerable Pasana, right? So we had both bhikkhu and bhikkhunis in America and Australia, and American and Australian people that would come together and read the suttas every Sunday, like we still do today. And so, because people were on opposite sides of the planet in different times, well, we developed a kind of culture over that. So instead of, people saying good day or good evening, I don't know who came up with it. I don't know if it was me. I'm not going to take credit for it. I don't remember, to be honest. It's so long ago. But the word Dave came up. Dave. What's that? What happens when you combine day and Eve? Dave. So when you see me say good Dave, there's Dave and good Dave. When you see me say good Dave, that's the international Maggasekha greeting. It covers all the bases, day and evening. Malika, you were in Thailand. Very good. Bante Metiko from Empty Cloud has been spending this Vasa in Thailand. His first trip there. Hello, Anna. Hello, Gregory. All right. Well, I don't see any questions. I want to try something. Again, I don't know how it goes. But it's not sutta roulette, which we might end up doing anyway, depending on how this goes. But one of the things that I do on the Discord as part of Maggasekha community is to give the lay people a glimpse into the monastic rules and the monastic life. You may log in one day and you see me copy paste something from the Vinaya, and it might come out of the blue, like, the rule that we can't have a human skull for a bowl. these kind of things, or that we're allowed to eat raw meat and drink blood if we're possessed or a werewolf or something like that. And what I love about the Vinaya is that it really gives an interesting glimpse into the culture of the time, but it also gives a glimpse into how monastics have lived for the past 2,600 years. And there's a lot of misconceptions that lay people always have. And in the modern day, there's a lot of actually a real perspective of lay people should not know the Vinaya, or they should at least not learn a little bit, because then they'll misunderstand and they don't have the proper context, etc. And these are all valid criticisms. I agree. However, I don't think it was such a hidden thing in the early days. Doesn't seem that way. As a matter of fact, I was just reading in the Vinaya today where somebody I was reading Dignikaya Parajika 2 about stealing. And in it, a monk does something and a layperson says, you've stolen, you're not a monk anymore, right? So this layperson at least knew that there is a rule that monks can't steal, right? So so it wasn't that, some kind of hidden esoteric thing. People knew, at least an cursory thing, that monks at least should not do X, Y, and Z. And so I'm actually of the inclination that I think, at least for Westerners, maybe. I mean, if born Buddhist people don't like to learn about it, so it's okay. But I am of the inclination that I think lay people should at least have a decent knowledge of how monks should and shouldn't act. And in this way, so that you can actually support monastics, right? So if for instance, a monk can't do X, Y, Z, and you're kind of, taking care of the monk or driving them around, and you say like, "Oh, Bante, I know you can't do this. Do you need that?" Right? And it's really helpful for a monastic, in this way. So, I think it's a very good thing, provided that you don't follow the old adage, a little knowledge can be a dangerous thing, right? So, but I do know that this is I'm in the extreme minority in this view. So, what I want to do is demystify some monastic rules. So, what I'd like to do is, if you have a question about a monastic rule, put it in the chat. We'll bring it up on Sutta Central. Bhante Ajahn Brahmali has done one of the greatest services in the last 50 years in Buddhism in the West, and has translated the whole of the Vinaya into English. And it's an amazing thing that he did. I'm so grateful to him that he did this. Because before that, it was last translated by somebody who started the translation in the 1920s and finished it in the 40s or the 50s. And there was a very famous Buddhist scholar, I.B. Horner. But the problem was, because of a lot of the rules can be pretty uh, what do they call it? TMI, can be pretty not safe for work, as it were. She just didn't translate those. So when I was learning to be before I even moved to the monastery to become a monk, and I was reading the monastic rules, like, what, where is all this? What, 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 what? There's no English translation of this. What is this? How has this not happened? And but now Bhante Ajahn Brahmali has done great work. This is the other half of why I love Sutta Central, because of Ajahn Brahmali's Vinaya stuff. So if you have a monastic rule that was maybe always confusing to you. You want to learn more about it, or you have a question about a monastic rule, type it in the chat and we'll go over it. Hello, Ryan. I think this is. Ah, all right. So you met me many years ago at Bhavana Society, but this the first time joining me on YouTube? The name doesn't sound familiar, so it's been a while. Ah, Julie has an interesting suggestion. Suttas with Sariputta. I quite like Sariputta. He's he's the major disciple that I'm probably connected with most in terms of my practice. So Sariputta is like the patron saint of Dhamma followers, of Dhamma practitioners, or um, he had no psychic powers. You know this. He could not see or hear devas. No psychic powers whatsoever, but the foremost in wisdom. Sariputta is good stuff. And the Vinaya is the term that encompasses all monastic rules. It encompasses the bhikkhus' rules, the bhikkhunis' rules. Bhikkhus and bhikkhunis share something like, I don't know, 70% of the rules, something to that effect. Right? Most of the rules are for both bhikkhus and bhikkhunis. There are some rules that are specific to bhikkhus and some rules that are specific to bhikkhunis. Often based on the sex, cultural gender roles, various things. These are different things that that have some differences. Hello, Michael Cluster. Whoa, that's an interesting question. Um, let's see. Let's go through here. Hello, did I say hello to Rick? Rick is always a welcome sight to be with us. Always enjoyable. Yeah. Kristen says, which is the most funny Vinaya rule to you? I like the one about monastics cannot hide someone else's belongings as a joke because it means a monastic did troll someone in the past. Yeah, there's also not tickling. There's a rule to not tickle. Yeah, because I think something happened where a monastic was tickled and died or something to that effect. Um, yeah. So there are a bunch of these kind of rules in there. The most funny Vinaya, I it might be the skull as a bowl. It might be. I mean, there's a bunch. It's just really interesting stuff. Anna says, "What?" So this basically what happened is you have this very austere monk. He's trying to be a good hardcore monk. He's trying to only wear like cast off robes, robes from the dead people in the charnel grounds, which is very common practice. And so he's like, "Well, I don't have a bowl. Here's a human skull. I might as well use it as a bowl." And he goes into town, like monks with their bowls, and he goes with the human skull. And a lay woman in the town sees this and screams that he's a demon worshiper. And of course, it gets to the Buddha, and the Buddha says, "Monks, one should not use a human skull as a bowl." Yeah. So there's a variety of these kind of funny, interesting rules in that way. The monk was trying to be very ascetic. He just made a bad mistake. Um, what other funny Vinaya rules are there? Hmm. Yeah, I guess that's probably about it. I mean, there's some that I find humorous, but that are pretty dark. I can actually have a very dark, dark sense of humor. I always have, but it also tends to happen when you do a career like mine. People who do like police, fire, EMT, child protective services, you tend to have a dark sense of humor just to survive because you see the dark stuff. You know, it is what it is. So, if anything popped up into my mind, I'll say it. So I've never heard of this meditation through consumption of feces. Never heard of this. Not even in like the ascetic stuff in the suttas. I have no idea where that comes from. Um, Never heard of it. I can't even respond to that. Yeah. Hello, Yuri. Wow, a bunch of names I'm not familiar with today. Did this stream go viral, or is somebody attacking the stream or something? I don't know. I'm just kidding. But wow, this is quite surprising. Um, Yuri knows about the consumption of feces. I guess. All right. I don't know. I have no idea what's going on with regard to that. I'm going to do Malika's question real quick, and then I'll get back to you, Gregory. Bante, is the monastic code by Ajahn Jeff Thanissaro the same? No. This is the thing about the Buddhist monastic code, BMC 1 and 2. BMC 1 and 2 are really good reference books for those in the Thai forest tradition. But they do not replace the actual Vinaya in reading the Vinaya. They really don't. I use them as a reference to this day. I still do. I mean, I have them. Um, but unfortunately, what happens is there are many monasteries where they don't actually have the actual Vinaya. They only have the Buddhist monastic code 1 and 2. And I couldn't believe that when I first heard about this. And then I saw it for myself in person. I couldn't believe it. I was like, really? Serious? I mean, this is, I mean, Ajahn Jeff does try to give the perspectives of like the Sri Lankans and the Burmese a little bit, but it's pretty much a Thai forest thing. And some Thai forest people say it's really his Thai forest lineage's perspective. So, you can't take it as a by itself thing. As a reference, like if I want to learn about how the Thai forest does things, and I'm not like at Abhayagiri or with Thai forest monks, as I have been able to do the last couple of years. I'll oh, what is Buddhist monastic code? Let's see what they say, and I'll look it up. But it is not a replacement for the actual Vinaya. Definitely not. And one of the sad things about the actual Vinaya is that most monks have never read it. Most monks have just never read it. Like I've come across like monks 30, 40 vasa not knowing a rule that I know. I mean, granted, it's a minor obscure rule. It's not something you're going to come across every day, kind of like the skull as a ball thing. But still, you know, it is what it is. I just love I've spent probably 12, 13 years reading the Vinaya over and over and over and over again. And I even read it now with the Pali. And, this is something that, especially if my plan is to ordain bhikkhus and bhikkhunis, I should know it in and out. I really should kind of be like, hey, yeah, I mean, you look at the big name monks who ordain monastics, Bhante Ji, Ajahn Brahm, right? Venerable Pasano, Langpur Pasano. These are all people who are considered Vinaya masters. So I should probably train to be a Vinaya master if I'm going to ordain people. So I take it very seriously, the study of the Vinaya, and I actually also enjoy it. I know the Bhikkhuni Vinaya as well. Not obviously not as much as my own, um, but I know it as well. Uh, so okay. Okay, so back to Gregory. If a monk makes a project offense, are they immediately no longer a monk, or do they have to be found guilty first? So this is a very good question. And it depends on what you mean. The second you have a prajika, you're no longer a monk. But what does that mean? It means you're no longer a monk. However, unless it's like on videotape or audio tape or other monks saw you do it, it's essentially an honor system. There's in the Buddhist, the Vinaya, there is no authority for other monks to take away the monkhood of somebody. Nobody can take away your monkhood. Only you can do that. You can do that by committing a parajika or giving it up. But if you there's a good number of monks in Thailand and in Burma and in Sri Lanka, and I don't know about Mahayana, but I'm sure in the Mahayana countries who committed a parajika. I mean, I actually wasn't looking for it, but I came across a video of a monk with a woman. I'm like, where did this come from? But it is what it is. And so people basically, if you want to, you can just not confess it and just stay a monk and be parajika. Really bad karma. Not good at all. The Buddha is like, some of the worst hells are for monks who are just deviant, bad monks. So it's not a good thing. But it is what it is. So it's really an honor system. If you have any hint of um shame, any hint of honor, honesty, you commit a prajika, it's going to eat away at you, and you're going to confess it, and that's just the end. Your life, your monastic life is done for this life. But if there's no shame, this, I think shame has been overly demonized in Western culture today. I think it's actually a very useful tool. Um, but yeah, so that's how it works. There is literally there's no rule that allows other monks to basically go up to a monk and say, "You're not a monk anymore." Now, of course, in places like Thailand, where monasticism has become what you call kind of like merged with the state and very kind of everything that the Buddha set out for it not to be, in terms of like the hierarchies and the rules and things like that. You can be defrocked as a monk in Thailand. I mean, I see why they do it, because there can be a lot of bad monks, but there's no rule for it either. So it's a uh, very interesting, complicated thing. By the monastic law, you're no longer a monk, but that doesn't mean you can't hide out in robes. People still do that. Have I met one? Probably not. I don't know. Um, it's not like I've met a huge number of monks in my life, but this is what I'm told and what I understand to be that. Of course, there are people, and sometimes later they're found out. I think I heard one story about a very, very senior monastic who was found out to have committed a parajika. All right, moving on. Do you ever get urges? How do you abstain yourself from wanting to lie with another person? So I think here, I guess you're talking about sexual urges. So what happens is, as you practice the path, this is probably the biggest problem for a young monk, like a young person who doesn't have a lot of practice and jumps into the monkhood, because they have a lot of things going against them. They have the young hormones and stuff like that, and they don't have the years of practice that counteract them. The practice naturally starts to dampen those urges. And even and by dampen, I mean it doesn't totally eradicate them, because until you're basically awakened, you have human drives. So you're going to have sexual urges. However, if you practice for years, sincerely, honestly, and you've developed on the path, you will have experiences that will greatly diminish those drives, to the point where it would be a lot less likely, if you were a monastic, to kind of fall into acting on those drives and committing a parajika, right? And this is what I tell people. I'd be like, if I do ever get to the point where I have monks under me, I'm like, if you're gonna do something stupid like this, at least come to me and disrobe first, so then you could, feel stupid later and want to be a monk again. Don't do it while you're a monk, and then you can never be a monk ever in your life again. That's the stupidest thing. But, people who are unpracticed, who have not gained wisdom and insight and understanding, they might be overcome by those urges and act stupidly, right? And do something that they're going to regret. So this is, I mean, I moved to the monastery when I was 35. I had been married already. I kind of like I've been there, done that for most of the major milestones of people have in life. And every once in a while when I think maybe in my 8 years as a monk, maybe twice did a thought come in my mind, it'd be kind of nice to just like, cuddle with somebody. And then I remembered like, all the other stuff that goes along with it. And I'm like, yeah, that's kind of that's a hassle. It's a lot of work. It's not worth it. It's the same thing with like, sexual drives. It's like, okay, you know, what is worth a few seconds of pleasure? Not much. Not much. Especially, this is the kind of perspective. It's like, is it really worth it? Not really. So when you develop the path and you have develop your insights and your wisdom into this, you reflect on the totality. You're not just intoxicated on the one thing, the pleasure, right? You reflect on the total amount of it. It's like, oh, should I disrobe and I want to get married? Oh, I gotta go on dates and I gotta do this and I gotta do that. And I'm so happy I don't have to do dating anymore. I'm so happy I don't have to sleep in the same bed with somebody. Even when I was young and married, that was kind of annoying, to be honest with you. It's like, I mean, it's nice and all, but I kind of understood how Lucy and Ricky had separate beds. So, it's something that you can't just overcome it with willpower. It's something that you overcome with wisdom and insight and understanding. And then even if the urges arise, they're muted. They're neutered. They're muted. They're what you call it? They're eunuchs, right? They're any power that they have is basically gone. And so you just reflect on it. It's like, yeah, it's not worth it. Rick has what guidance does the Buddha give to monks concerning cleaning and caring for their body and their dwellings? As my chronic illness has progressed, it's become difficult keeping up. Oh, there's lots of guidelines for putting out water, sweeping, all these kind of things. This is all in the Vinaya, like how monks should take care of their domicile, even like protocols and procedures for when a monk is visiting the monastery, what the junior monk should make sure, that they have water out for the monk and all these kind of things. So yeah, this is all, even like hanging your robes, different procedures in relation to the latrines, the bathrooms, all of these kind of things. Um, all of these kind of things are, being clean, neat, tidy, and orderly is something encouraged and is something that monks, should do. Um, Obviously there is, taking baths and things like that. Although there's an interesting rule about monks and bathing. So it starts out because uh, these monks were having a bit too much fun bathing in this one place where the king goes to bathe. And the king comes with his entourage and his wives, and he's like, "What's going on? I'm trying to bathe, and these Sakyan sons are all spending too much time in my water and all these things." So the Buddha says, "Monks, I've set down the rule that you can only bathe once every, I think it was once a month, and then it was raised up to once every 2 weeks, and then after that, like, so there's this whole process, which you see in the monks' rules. You'll see actually how it's developed. Right? You'll see it starts out this way, then something happens, and the Buddha adjusts the rule, and something happens, and the Buddha adjusts the rule, and so basically, then the rule basically was negated. But but there is a because at the time of the Buddha, there were ascetics who believed that you can purify yourself by bathing 3 times a day. The Buddha was trying to set aside from that, like, don't spend. You're not one of those kind of ascetics. You're a Buddhist ascetic, so you shouldn't be, you know, spending too much time in the water. These kind of things. Um, so yeah, all of these are prescribed and encouraged in the Vinaya. The monks to take care of their bodies and their domiciles and things like that. The Buddha as community manager. Well, of course. But what do you think all the abbots and abbotesses are in all the Buddhist, the bhikkhu and bhikkhuni monasteries? They're community managers. That's how they. That's you create a community and you have to manage it. So I think we have some people with us today who are, how shall I say, doing a little trolling, which is I don't mind trolls. I've dealt with trolls for a long time, and they there's a lot of fun regarding them. But so I'm not going to engage in some of these things here, but let's see. All right. So Michael says my favorite rule is one should wear robes at all times around children. That's not a rule. The rule is you should wear the rule. So in ancient India and in many monasteries, the only thing that monks had to wear was their sarong, the cloth around their waist. This what they call upper robe. This is not worn in monasteries. If you go to Thailand, that's still the case. If you go to a monastery, you'll see monks in just what they call their angsa, just this cloth that goes across their chest, which is a modern invention. It's not something you see in the ancient Vinaya. Um, so in the monasteries, monks were basically going around bare chested, but the rule is you should have your upper robe when you go into the villages. When you go into the among lay people, you should have your upper robe. So that's the rule in terms of there's nothing about clothing and children. Okay, so Cameron has a thing here. What are helpful techniques or practices that have helped others face serious illness and death? Thank you. Mindfulness of death practices. Right? Understanding the coming to an understanding and a peace with the nature of reality. That is the best way to handle these things. When you really know with wisdom and insight that you're going to die, you're going to get sick, you're going to get old. Well, when you get old, when you get sick, when you're on death's door, it's not such a surprise. Right? It becomes such a surprise and such a horrible thing to people because they go their whole lives avoiding these things, and so they're not prepared when it strikes. It's like a soldier in a war. and they just they don't train, they don't do anything. They're just hanging out, and then all of a sudden the enemy attacks in the middle of the night, and they're like, "What the hell happened? How did this happen? What you totally did not pay attention. You did not understand the situation you were in. The situation we're in is that we're going to get old, we're going to get sick, and we're going to die. That's the situation we're in. There's no changing that. There's no escaping that. There's no getting around it. And to come to an acceptance and an understanding of that requires practice, reflection, and insight. The more you do that practice and reflection, the more your insight grows. The more your acceptance of the realities of nature, of Dhamma, grows. And so when these things arise, you don't suffer as much. They're not as much of a sucker punch, an attack out of nowhere, a surprise attack. You knew they were coming. You spent years reflecting that they were coming. And now they're here. It's just the way it is. So doing those mindfulness of death practices, contemplation on old age, sickness, and death, the 5 subjects of contemplation, all of these things will allow you to face the realities of life in a skillful, beneficial, mindful, wise way. Oh, Gregory says how lay people should treat monks who have committed parajikas but not found guilty. How would you know they committed a parajika? That's the issue. How would you know? This is the thing about lay people supporting monastics. You don't know what monk is a really good monk and what monk isn't. You just don't know. There might be some, you might have a monk who seems very wise and they're a really good speaker and all these kind of things, but you don't really know them. Even if you were visiting their monastery and listening to their talks for years, you don't really know. If you lived with them for years, then you know a bit more. Right? So when when it comes to lay people dealing with monastics, whether parajika or non-parajika, really what you're probably going to be inclined to end up dealing with is how they treat people in general. How does this monk engage with people? How do they treat people? How do they react when situations are tough or not going their way? Right? Does anger visibly control their actions, etc. You can observe these as you get to know a monastic over time. And so then you can understand, well, maybe this is not a monk I want to support or be around. And so you just go somewhere else. Or maybe, which is more likely, they're part of a monastery that has a bunch of monks, and some monks seem really nice and kind, and some monks not so much. So when you support the monastery, you're supporting good and bad monks. That's how it is in every monastery. Right? So this is why, in many ways, it's more important to support the sangha, the monastics, than it is to get too attached to any one monk teacher. This is something that I never really had like one monk teacher, nor did I ever really attach to any one monk teacher. Even Bante G, who I was around his teachings for 8.5 years, before moving to the monastery, and he ordained me and everything. But he's not my one and only teacher. He wasn't before and he wasn't after. Still a very important part of my practice. But his faults as a person, his imperfectible, he's not a perfect person. Nobody is unless you're awakened. When they didn't bother me as much. It's just he's just he's a person like all of us. It is what it is. People tend to kind of idolize people, whether it's politicians, rock stars, whatever you call it, sports players, Buddhist monks, whatever. We have this inclination. The guru is perfect and so wonderful, and he'll help me get to awakening. Probably not. To be honest with you, probably not. But so what I would say is it's good to be around monks, but it's also good to, have an open eye. Don't you know, don't fall into the love of guru trap, as it were. Anna says, "Can a monk crochet?" Weird, but it kind of popped in my head. I mean, monks sew. So, I mean, I guess if you're using the crochet skill for like to make clothes, like a sweater or something, I guess. Um, you know, I guess it's okay. Oh boy, we're having lots of fun today in the chat. Oh, lots of interesting people. I think this might be the first time that Dhammapalooza has ever been invaded by interesting trolley people. See, this is the thing about this kind of stuff. I learned as a young internet person in the early days of the internet, when the internet was great, because it was truly, totally the Wild West, and all kinds of wacky stuff happened on the internet. You just don't feed the trolls. Same thing with your mind. Aversive thought comes up in your mind. What happens the more you fight it? The stronger it gets. So it's better to have a laugh. Is what it is. All right. So Christian has a good question. What do you think of the dying words of the Buddha saying that the minor rules should be abandoned? He didn't say the minor rules should. He says that they can. This is a very hotly debated, contested topic. You also kind of have to, how this has kind of come down, you have to understand the Eastern mindset compared to the Western. The Eastern mindset is that the ancestors, the elders, are essentially not to be questioned. And so what has come down is that in the first council, which is said to be of all fully awakened beings, this line was discussed. And these arhants basically kind of like question Ananda, and they're like, well, it's not very clear, so we're not going to abandon or change any of the rules. And the tradition since then is, well, you think about it from this perspective. You are a Buddhist monk 1,000 years ago, 500 years ago, 200 years ago, and I mean a Buddhist monk in a Buddhist country, in an Asian country. And you read that arahants, no less, did not change or abolish any of the minor rules. Who are you to change those rules? Who are you? Right? So that's the mindset. This is one of the reasons why most Westerners do not understand this. Because most Westerners who go to Buddhism are very kind of progressive, left-leaning. The Buddhist world is very, very conservative. Very conservative. Because Buddhists, especially like the Sri Lankans, for instance, view it as their cultural job to keep the Dhamma from being corrupted and lost. So the minute you, as a Westerner, start saying, this rule's kind of silly, it doesn't really make sense in the Western concept, maybe we should. You're not abolishing this rule. Arahants from 2,000 years ago, 2,400 years ago didn't abolish it. Who the heck are you to abolish this rule? They have a good point. However, I do think a perspective is missed here. This is the perspective of the Buddha and Arahants understanding anicca. They're awakened beings. They have to understand anicca. That's how they're awakened. So they understand what? Everything changes. So the Buddha, in my perspective, understood, and you have to kind of know the Vinaya to see this. 96% of the Vinaya rules are specific to ancient India. Now, there might be some overlap in different cultures, but they're very specific to ancient India. That other 4% are universal. Monks shouldn't be having sex. That's universal. It's the same in the Buddha's day, the same in modern day, right? And it's the same in multiple religions that have ascetic monastics, right? Monks should just not be having sexual intercourse. The time and the location do not change that. Monks shouldn't be killing. Monks shouldn't be stealing, right? Time and location do not change this. Monks shouldn't ride in a vehicle. That's one of the rules. Monks are not allowed to ride in vehicles. Period. There's only one exemption. If a monk is sick. But the rule is monks do not ride in vehicles. Period. So most of the majority of monastics in the world who are taking cars, buses, trains, planes, that rule is being broken thousands of times a day, every day. At the time of the Buddha, riding in a vehicle was a highfalutin thing. It was like, ascetic samanas who are, bald, wearing robes and supposed to have, poverty, all this kind of stuff. They're not supposed to be riding in vehicles. So it made sense. Now, everybody gets around with vehicles. So in the modern age, it doesn't make much sense. So what you get is this rule is basically almost universally just ignored. but it's still a rule. Right? What do you do with that? Do you think if the Buddha was a if a Buddha came today, do you think riding in a bus would be seen as highfalutin, as ritzy, as rich? No, right? Today, riding in a bus, especially in the West, that's seen as like that's what poor people do. Only poor people are on buses. Ugh. So the rule probably would not be the same. It would probably be quite different. And so my perspective is that the Buddha allows for rules to change. Makes perfect sense. The problem comes with what rules and how we do it. Because so what you have right now are two extremes. You have traditional Buddhists who say no, these are the rules that come down; they can't be changed. You have very progressive Westerners who are like, all these rules are misogynistic. Blah blah blah. We're just going to throw them all out. Both are wrong. Both are wrong. Both are extremes. So, as Buddhism comes to the West, we have to think of how we adjust the rules to the new culture and the time that don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, hold to the spirit of the Vinaya, right? Find this balance. And this is what monastics have been doing in the West for close to as long as I've been alive. And we're still doing it. Right? And monastics like myself and the newer generation will continue to still do this. So it's a very, very complicated, hotly debated topic. Um, and there's perspectives on all sides. So there's no easy answer to that question. Julie has a question. If you don't mind me asking, when did you know the time was right for you to ordain? Mm, I don't know about the specific time per se, but there came a point. I had been a meditator about 5 years, a Buddhist about 3, when I started to get the calling, the inkling that I might want to try to be a monastic. That was around 2010. And it was around there that I started inclining towards adjusting my life towards being a monastic. And so, I started engaging in like, I didn't really stop dating per se, but I was like not really inclined to go out looking for dates anymore. I still had dates and stuff like that, but it wasn't like I didn't go out looking for them. It you know, just kind of happened. Um, and I was just more inclined towards study and practice of Dhamma and adjusting my life, not knowing if I was really going to become a monastic, but kind of inclining and adjusting my life towards that, lessening the things that I owned in life, moving towards the end of my car payments and all these kind of things. And then it came down to basically a leap of faith, right? Am I leaving my job and my pension and my good lay life to become a Buddhist monk? And the answer was I'm at least going to give it a try because I know if I don't, I'll regret it. I don't know if I didn't know I was going to be a monk. It's not easy to become a monk. There's lots of barriers. Even if you're pretty, you're healthy and there's not all kinds of extra issues, it's still not easy. And if you have all the other kind of conditions and things like that, it becomes a lot harder. So it's not a guaranteed thing. It's not an easy thing. So I went into it kind of open-minded. I went into it, well, I want to be a monk. I want to at least give it a shot. If I don't make it, I know what I'll do when I come back to lay life. And then I became a monk. And even to this day, it's like, okay. Actually, I was just talking to my nephew, who I helped raise from the time he was 1 to the time he was 10. I was essentially like a live-in uncle, father kind of a thing. And he was asking me because he was talking. He's like, when I was younger, I kind of thought maybe you would come back, like maybe you'd be done with the monastic life. But now I don't think like that. And he's 18 now, by the way. He's an adult. He's in college. He's doing his thing. But he thought, well, what would you do if you left? And I said, well, I wanted to be a photographer. So if I know, like, if I come back out of lay life, if I go back to lay life, I'll have to probably rely on my family, to live with, X, Y. So I thought about all of these things because I knew that I don't know if I will be a monk for the rest of my life. I can't tell. Anybody who thinks that they know how something is going to be for the rest of their life, they're fooling themselves. They're setting themselves up for all kinds of stupidity. Because the minute you think you have life all figured out, life will throw you a curveball. So you don't know, right? So it wasn't necessarily that I knew the right time. It was the arc of my path that I was leading towards. Was that it was do or die, leap of faith, and I don't know, but we'll see how it goes. And so far, so good. Honestly, even in my darker times as a monastic, when I've really searched my mind, searched my soul, as it were, as a non-Buddhist would say, there's parts of me that would like to do non-monastic things, but there's no part of me that's like, let's disrobe. Let's just end this. So here I am as a monk. We'll see in 5 years and 10 years or whatever, but it is what it is. Metic has a question. What are the rules regarding accepting food offered instead of imposing one's own dietary preferences if it's not for health reasons? So, in all honesty, monks really shouldn't be picky about their food, even if it is for basic health reasons. The best thing for lay people who are offering food to monastics is to ask them. Just ask them, like, what are your preferences? Do you have any issues, etc.? Yada yada yada. For instance, for me, Sri Lankan food and me do not get along. My stomach is just destroyed by Sri Lankan food. I honestly, I have an aversion to Sri Lankan food. It's just not my thing. But when people give me Sri Lankan food, well, I eat when I know what I know is not going to hurt my stomach as much, and it is what it is. Right? If I go stay at a Sri Lankan monastery, I'm going to get Sri Lankan food. It is what it is. So I just deal with it. You know, but it is nice when there's a Sri Lankan person that asks me, because Sri Lankan people do know about Westerners. They do, Western monastics, so they do know, like, that probably these Western monastics probably can't handle our food. Maybe we can give them some Western food, or maybe, so some do ask. Um, but I deal with it. I know what's best for my body. What's best for my body is almost zero carbs, plenty of meat protein, and, like chicken in a salad is like the best meal for me. Absolutely the best meal. When I'm home, when I'm with family and like people who really know me, that's what I eat. I have a big salad with chicken and, various things of protein, and that's just because of my body and my all kinds of various things that go into. That's the best thing for me. If I have lots of carbs, I start to gain weight and all kinds of things like that. Right now, I'm overweight. I'm trying to lose probably about 15 pounds at least. It's because I've been having a lot of carbs as of late. Um, not necessarily to my own inclination. It is just what it is. I'm not going to tell people what they should get for me. These kind of things. Um, but so it's best when people ask. You know, as- when you're at a monastery, then the monastery will kind of technically be that intermediary. Like the monastery will say to the people, like a Dana coordinator will say, XY Bante can't handle this, XY Bante, Z whatever Bante can't handle this, A Bante can't handle that. And, that's a good thing so that the people know. But really, the best thing is, as a layperson, is to be kind and ask the monastics so that they can eat what is best for them. You know, mostly, mostly people have the best when they eat what they grew up with. That's just how it is. Sri Lankan monks grew up with Sri Lankan food. Thai people grew up with Thai food. That's what they eat. Western monks grew up with Western food. And one of the things that Western monks have had to deal with, and it's obviously for some people, it doesn't make any difference. For some people, it's a lot harder, is, you know, going into a culture where you're going to get a lot of food that may or may not agree with you. I thought like if I deal with this for a bunch of years, maybe my enzymes, I'll get used to it, etc., etc. Like with soy, I figured, well, soy doesn't really help, kind of really gasses up my stomach. I don't know if I digest it very well, but I bet you if I eat soy for 5.5 years, my enzymes will change, etc. Never did. Soy still gasses me up pretty good. Gives me stomach, it's not something I would ever choose to have. But as a Buddhist monk, there's always soy around, especially in vegetarian places. It is what it is. So you kind of just grin and bear it and you deal with it. Um, and people ask, then it's okay. It's better for lay people to ask. I mean, obviously, if you're a monastic and you're really seriously impacted health wise, maybe you do kind of tell some, maybe a close lay person, and then that lay person does the rest, tells the other lay people, etc. It's like, hey, Bante told me XYZ. So let's make sure, XYZ. Um, yeah. All right. I don't see anything left in the chat. Lots of questions, very productive. Oh, wait. And Gregory says, maybe it is Mara in your stomach, not the tofu. Maybe. But yeah, tofu and I, not so good. When it's fried, I do a bit better. Um, what's it called? Tempura, maybe it's called. Um, or when Kathy, the office manager at Bhavana, when she would cook, she was vegetarian for 30 years, and she made some really good fried vegetarian food. And it was like, this is pretty good. That doesn't bother my stomach. If it's fried, it doesn't bother my stomach as much. That's true. All right. Hello, Mithras. Question here. What are your thoughts on secular Buddhism? I'm curious as to what you think about Buddhists who pick and choose what they believe in. Are there any words of the Buddha that address this? Hmm, a really good question, actually. That's a really good question. I want to say there's probably some general words that could be applied to this in the suttas, but nothing very specific. It's a good question in terms of suttas. So, what are my thoughts on secular Buddhism? In my early days, I was very against it. This is like early days, like years before I was a monk. Um, I was very, I was very not for it. I felt it was kind of a bastardization of the Buddhist teachings. These days, I'm a bit more open to it existing. Um, I think because there are grades, there are gradations of secular Buddhism, right? So it's not just one thing, right? So that's what it's important to understand that because there are these kind of like quasi secular vipassana places, but you go to them and they might talk about a sutta. And you're kind of like, they've come to this mixture that you don't kind of know how they got there. Usually it's the mixture that of the layperson who created it. Um, and oftentimes those the men, at least that I know, that I'm thinking of, like a Jack Cornfield, one of those other guys. The other guy I always mix up. This lay teacher in Colorado who I've met. They're all like at one point they were monastics, and they're maybe mostly Buddhist, but there's also this, like they're also like therapists, and it's this kind of weird mixture of Buddhism and secular Westernism, and there's different levels of it. It's like almost like putting like colored dye in water, and like some like each level of green and red and blue and whatever will be different mixes depending on the place and the people you're talking about. It's a very large, diverse group. So the way I view these things like secular Buddhism now is that all of this diversity of Buddhism to quasi Buddhism in the West is part of the panoply, the totality of Buddhism growing in the West. there's not just one Buddhism growing in the West. There can't be. You know, you look at like the Buddhist strongholds, like Thailand. There was a time that Thailand there was no Buddhists in Thailand, and probably over hundreds and hundreds of years, different types of Buddhisms kind of fought for whatever, and now there's a Thai Buddhism. Now there's a Burmese Buddhism, right? So things develop in a culture over time. And so what in America, right? What's one of the famous ways that people talk about America? America is the Wild West, right? When it comes to Buddhism, America is the Wild West of Buddhism. So in America, you have a huge variety of different types of people engaging with Buddhism at different levels. You have traditional Buddhist immigrants. You have secular, atheist type Buddhists. You have Vipassana type. I don't know, secular atheist Buddhists. I shouldn't have. What you know what I mean. You have Vipassana, people who are kind of them. So there's this huge diversity. And of course, like you said, you have Thai Buddhists and Sri Lankan Buddhists and Burmese Buddhists and Vietnamese Buddhists and uh, Korean Buddhists and Chinese Buddhists, and so you have what America's, used to be a melting pot, right? It used to be just a place where all these people from all over the world come together. They're in one place, and so that's Buddhism in America, and Buddhism is growing, it's developing, it's figuring itself out in America. And part of I'm a Theravada, American Theravada Buddhist monastic. So part of my vision is how do I grow Buddhism in America? I'm not worried about how this other Theravada group or this Mahayana group or this secular group grow. They're doing their thing as part of Buddhism becoming part of the pop culture and part of the culture in America. What's my part in this? That's what Maggasekha is a large part of that. Maggasekha is my vehicle, my vision for growing the Dhamma, growing the early Buddhist text, the sutta Dhamma in the West. And as I've said before, we were talking about the letting go of rules. I don't follow the extreme traditional view, nor do I follow the extreme progressive view of we have to throw everything out. My inclination is somewhere in the middle. There are some things that need to change, but there's a bunch of stuff we need to keep. So and I'm going to be for many decades to come, as long as I'm a monastic and Maggasekha is growing and all that kind of stuff. If my life goes down that path, part of my life is going to be following, how do I get that mixture? The best of the old and the best of the new. Where does that mix come in? So it's an ongoing project. All right. So I think we should meditate at least for maybe. It's very rare that we do a Dhammapalooza where there's no meditation, but we are short on time. So I don't think we should do the half hour. I think maybe we should at least do the 10 minutes. We'll do a very short meditation. I'm not going to guide it. We'll just sit quietly for 10 minutes. Okay? Slowly begin to open your eyes, becoming aware of the room around you and the people in it, reflecting on the state of your mind while we're in this nice, calm, quiet. We'll read some Dhammapada verses and then we'll call it a night. The wise. Should one find a man who points out faults and who reproves, let him follow such a wise and sagacious person as one would a guide to hidden treasure. It is always better, never worse, to cultivate such an association. Let him admonish, instruct, and shield one from wrong. He indeed is dear to the good and detestable to the evil. Do not associate with evil companions. Do not seek the fellowship of the vile. Associate with the good friends. Seek the fellowship of noble men. He who drinks deep the Dhamma lives happily with a tranquil mind. The wise man ever delights in the Dhamma made known by the noble one. Irrigators regulate the rivers. Fletchers straighten the arrow shaft. Carpenters shape the wood. The wise control themselves. Just as the solid rock is not shaken by the storm, even so the wise are not affected by praise and blame. On hearing the teachings, the wise become perfectly purified, like a lake deep, clear, and still. The good renounce attachment for everything. The virtuous do not prattle with a yearning for pleasures. The wise show no elation or depression when touched by happiness or sorrow. He is indeed virtuous, wise, and righteous, who neither for his own sake nor for the sake of another does any wrong, who does not crave for sons, wealth, or kingdom, and does not desire for success by unjust means. Few among men are those who cross to the further shore. The rest, the bulk of men, only run up and down the hither bank. But those who act according to the perfectly taught Dhamma, will cross the realm of death so difficult to cross. Abandoning the dark way, let the wise man cultivate the bright path. Having gone from home to homelessness, let him yearn for the delight in detachment, so difficult to enjoy, giving up sensual pleasures. With no attachment, let the wise man cleanse himself of defilements of the mind. Those whose minds have reached full excellence in the factors of enlightenment, who, having renounced acquisitiveness, rejoice in not clinging to things, rid of cankers, glowing with wisdom, they have attained nibbana this very life. All right, friends. Let's do our final business, and then we'll share merits and call it a day, or a night, or a morning, a Dave. All right. So, friends, if you are joining us for the first time and you'd like to know more information about myself or the organization Maggasekha, you can go to the website scrolling on the bottom of the screen, maggasekha.org, maggasekha.org. Link is also in the YouTube channel description. In that website, this is my headquarters. Everything that I do, every article, every retreat, every video, every live stream, whatever, you will see that I put up notifications for that on that website. The top right hand of the website, you can put your email in, and you'll get an email every time a new post is posted on the website. You can do the same thing on the YouTube. You can click subscribe, click the bell, and every time a new live stream or video comes out, you can get notified via email. We also have our Maggasekha online community on the Discord program. We are a community that both is centered and focused around the suttas, the early texts, both in study and practice. If that's something that sounds interesting to you, you're welcome to send an email to the email below, maggasekha@gmail.com, and ask for an invite. In terms of regular weekly activities, all of my activities are subject to me being in a place that I'm able to do the events. In my nomad days, this can change depending on where I am. But normally, Monday nights, 7 p.m. New York time, GMT -5, we have our Dhammapalooza that we're just finishing up now. Monday through Friday at 8 a.m. New York time, we have our half-hour morning monastery experience where we do precepts, some chanting, and some short Dhamma talks as to start your day off, like you would if you were staying at a monastery. Then Saturdays at 3 p.m. on the Insight Timer program, I do a session every week for an hour and a half, Dhamma session with meditation, Dhamma talk, and Q&A. And Sunday nights, we have a community sutta reading on our Discord program that we've been doing for almost 8 years together. We've been reading through the suttas. With that, friends, I think we can do our... oh, hey, Jim. Good to see you. Gretchen says something sounds like New Age BS. Uh-oh. So we will now do our sharing of merits and call it a night. Dukkha patta chane dukkha, baya patta chane baya, soka patta chane soka, hontu sabbe pipaniyo, etavata chamehi, sampatang punya sampatang, sabbe deva anumodantu, sabba sampatti sittiya, akasatta chabumata deva naga mahiddika, punyang tang anumoditva, charang rakantu sasanang. May the suffering ones be suffering free, and the fear struck fearless be. May the grieving shed all grief, but may all beings find relief. May all beings share this merit of ours that we've thus acquired for the acquisition of all kinds of happiness. May beings inhabiting space and earth, devas, nagas, and yakas of mighty power, share in this merit of ours. May they long protect the Buddha's dispensation. Sadhu. All right, friends. Well, that concludes another Monday night Dhammapalooza. Suki Hotu, may you be well and at ease. Practice well and be well. May you have a spiritually successful and peaceful practice until we meet again, which, if I'm alive, would be in about 11 hours tomorrow morning for a morning monastery experience, or maybe for Saturday on Insight Timer, Sunday on the Discord, or next Monday for another Dhammapalooza. Have a good week.